Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Improving's virtual Lunch and Learn. Before we start, I want to inform you about a feature in the presentation that will make the session more interactive. Please make note of the question mark icon at the top upper right of the presentation screen. When you click that icon, it will open the question and answer feature, which allows you to send our moderator questions to be delivered to our presenter, Claudio at the appropriate time. We are excited to present Claudio Asala's refactoring test code, who will be sharing this shortly. Thank you, and here we go.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us during your lunch break or whatever kind of break you're finding yourself in at this point in time. So let's get things rolling with the refactoring test code beyond Red-Green-Refactor talk that I've put together recently. I'm Claudio Asala. You can see my email up there. I always encourage folks to, write down my email. If at the end of the talk you have, further questions or things that will come up later, just, reach me through my email. Feel free to ask questions about either the presentation that you see here, or as you see on my business card there, I'm a technical director with the Houston office for Improving. I do get to do a lot of software development every day on a daily basis, right? But I'm passionate about a bunch of different things, as you can see. So anything you see on my slides that may, make you think of questions or comments or whatever, just, reach out to me, and I'm always happy to have conversations, with folks that I've interacted somehow through talks or, any kind of walks of life. So let's get this thing rolling. So testing, this is a very exciting topic for me. Everybody who knows me will know, you say testing around me, I'm like, getting excited already to talk about. So I have a whole other talk that later you guys can look up on the Improving YouTube channel. If you look for Improving Testing in Agile, I have a talk where I go over a little bit of my journey, where I started learning about unit tests, and then later I figured out I was really writing integration tests, and then later I learned about TDD, test-driven development or design, and then from there to behavior-driven development, BDD. So it took me a while to get to where I am right now with the things that I'm going to be sharing with you guys. So if you watch that talk, at your own time there, you can learn a little bit more about it. But long story short, there is a time when every developer will learn about, how to write tests, and we're going to learn about unit tests, integration tests, TDD, BDD, and all those things. But we all end up falling into this trap where we drop the ball when we are thinking about the Red-Green-Refactor mantra, right? Red-Green-Refactor. Red, you write a failing test. You run the test, you want to make sure that it's red, it fails, because if you just wrote the test, you didn't implement anything, you run the test and the test is green, well, wait a minute, that's not right. So you want to make sure that you take that step. Then you write just enough implementation code to make your test pass. And then what do? You refactor. The sizes of the boxes are the sizes to illustrate what I believe that it's where we should spend the most time on. So we should spend quite a bit of time writing that initial test to essentially describe what is it that we want to have when we are done implementing the feature, right? And then write just enough code to make it pass, right? And then the refactor part, and here's where a lot of folks drop the ball, that they only refactor the implementation code, not the test code. So why is that a problem? And by the way, in this talk, I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time showing C# code. Later, I'm going to show a little bit of TypeScript / JavaScript, but the language does not matter. The things that I'm going to be sharing here, I use with C#, JavaScript, TypeScript, unit test, integration test, end-to-end test, React apps, Angular apps, it doesn't matter. When I've gone to the Ruby on Rails space, and I still do some Ruby on Rails development, I still follow the same mindset. So different libraries, different programming languages, but the mindset does not change, okay? So this talk is about the approach. So let's go with start with an example that's it's based on a domain that everybody understands, because everybody likes pizza, right? So let's pretend that we have this method, make meat lover pizza, right? That has this implementation. You have a pizza and then you add toppings to it. And then we go to some sort of a class to learn about writing tests. We end up writing tests that will quite probably look like this, right? You instantiate your object or objects, you call methods on it, you get some sort of return, right? And then you assert on the state of that object, if it's a state-based test as opposed to an interaction-based test. But that goes beyond the point. The point is that you learn about that. Instantiate things, call methods, assert on the results. And then you end up learning about the AAA pattern, the arrange, act, assert. The problem that I always mention to people is that it's okay to write tests like that in day one, when you just learned about that approach. Now, if you've gone a year, 3, 5, 10 years, and you're still writing tests in that manner, you have not evolved your practice of writing tests. And I'll tell you how I've personally evolved and how do I evolve like this kind of test. So problems with that kind of test is that the code will get copied. Everybody practices clipboard inheritance, right? So to say, where you have your meat lover pizza and you have the test for it. You have to create a Hawaiian pizza. You have the test for it. What do? You copy one, you paste it, and then you just change what's different. So in the case of a Hawaiian pizza, you know, it's a different method in this case that we are calling to make the pizza, and the toppings are different, right? And then you end up having this one test fixture, one class or one file with, you know, dozens. I've seen hundreds of tests that look somewhat like this, where they look very similar. And now, of course, in the real world, the arrange part, it's never a one-liner like that, where you just say instantiate the object and call the method on it. No, usually the setup part of the method, the arrange part, it's, you know, instantiating multiple objects and instantiating mock objects and setting up mocks and stubs. And I've seen like setups that go for like tens and even hundreds of lines of code just in the setup part. And then that gets copied and copied. And again, problem with that is, and before I move on there, is that people will abandon the tests after a while. Because when you open a test file that has hundreds, thousands of lines of code, and the code is very cluttered and nobody wants to touch that code anymore, people will abandon the tests. So it defeats the purpose. On the beginning is like, oh, now I'm writing tests, that's great. Oh, now I'm looking at code coverage numbers. Oh, I have 85% code coverage. But then as defects come in and you have to address them, or as new features come in and you have to change what's there, the practice is change the test first. The implementation code looks pristine, right? Because you have high code coverage. So the implementation looks pretty good. But you go to test to change the test code, ew, it looks nasty. I don't want to change that. I don't even know all of these mocks and all of these assertions. I don't know what to do there. I just have to add an if block somewhere in the implementation to account for this feature. So that change is easy, but changing the test, not so much. So people will abandon tests because of that, right? So that's a problem. And in a situation like that, so by the way, another problem with this approach here is that when you look at the way that all these assertion or test runners work, when you have multiple assertions like that, say you verify the first one. Does this pizza have cheese? Yes, so we're good. Does it have pepperoni? Yes, good. Does it have Italian sausage? No. Bam, the test fails and you get out of it. So then you have to fix that part of the code, and then you rerun the test. Now you have Italian sausage, but you don't have Canadian bacon, so it fails. So you keep going back and forth like that, as opposed to just applying one fix and rerunning the test. That's not a big deal if you have one simple small test, but when you have thousands of tests in your test suite, that gets pretty annoying, right? So it's much better to have the test tell you at once, hey, look, these are all the things that are wrong with this execution right now, right? Fix it first before you try running the test again. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. So one very minor improvement, very easy to do, is to go to that assertion, to those assertions, and just wrap them up so that they read more on what are you asserting on, right? So assert pizza only contains the following toppings, and then a list of those toppings, right? As opposed, again, to having that wall of repeated characters where you have to read through the whole thing. Assert contains pizza toppings, topping goes into topping name equals all that stuff, right? So you make it a lot more concise like that. Better yet, I've gotten into the habit of actually writing it like this. All lowercase, the words are separated with underscores, and I only use uppercase for the things that I want to draw people's attention to it. Because in this case, what if the pizza comes back containing all of those things, and it also has, I don't know, pickles, which I do not like, right? That should fail my own personal eater, pizza eater test, but it wouldn't fail a test as it were here before. Some folks might say, well, but writing, this is C# code, you're writing a method written like that, it looks like Ruby. Yeah, I am right now speaking English with a Brazilian accent. You can still understand my message, I'm pretty sure. There will be times when you're gonna go like, what did he say? I know the accent will come in, but it is what it is, unfortunately. So here my point is, I'm using C# in this case just as a facilitator to describe the spec of the feature that I'm building. So I will write my methods in that manner if that makes it easier for me to read, because this is not C# code, that is implementation code of the feature, right? It's a code to describe the feature. It's a different purpose as to how I'm using the language. And then what does that method actually look like? Well, that's just a for each on the list of things that I'm expecting, the toppings that I'm expecting, and I have my assertion there, right? So again, instead of copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, everybody knows how to write a for each and call a method to do the thing, right? So now that I have that assertion, I can reuse that assertion on my other tests, right? It's not a big deal. Again, if I look at the way that those assertions are implemented, it will not catch a problem like, somebody went into the meat lover implementation and put pineapple in it. Well, not on my meat lover pizza, come on, right? But those assertions, we have the tests, we have 100% code coverage, but it's not covering this fact that this business here, it's my pizza place, okay, come on. Meat lover pizzas should not have pineapple, period, right? So it wouldn't catch that. That's of importance to the business. The number of code coverage does not matter, right, for something like this. So again, by having that assertion as a method that I control, I can come in and implement something for that, where I say, well, besides checking that the given toppings, expected toppings are on the pizza, also write something to make sure that you're not getting anything else. So in this case, I'm just going the easy route to say, count the toppings, because if I have the ones expected and the count is the same, I feel pretty positive that I'm not getting anything extra, right? So that's another benefit of having this, centralizing your assertions based on the business thing that you are checking. One problem with this approach that I've taken here, should my pizza, my meat lover pizza, come in with pineapple, the test now would fail, but it would tell me the following. Hey, we were expecting 6 toppings and we got 5. Or not even toppings, it's just saying we expected 6, but we got 5. 5 what? What did you expect? What did you get? What's, the extra stuff that you got? Again, if you have a suite of thousands of tests and you have tests failing like that, you look at the failures, you're gonna still be clueless as to what exactly happened there, right? What business feature, what are the features that are not working based on the last change that we've made or what have you. So that's not great, okay? It's giving us some sort of value out of tests, but we can do better, right? So get to know the assertion library that we are using. Many times we just learn assert equal or assert is true, assert is not null, and we stop there. Well, make sure to learn what other assertion methods are available so that you can leverage them. So like in this case, I've learned that the one that comes with X units, right? I could easily just, like here, I have my pizza toppings, which is, each topping is a complex object that happens to have a name, right? So I want to grab that and just project an array out of it. And if I pass those two arrays into assert are equal, it actually knows how to tell me, a better story. It will tell me, hey, the expected is an array containing the following, but the actual that we received contains the following. Well, that's slightly better, right? I can see that all of my expected toppings are there, but I do not quite see because it trims at the end, so I cannot see what else came in. So unless if you have a small enough array, that would be great. In this case, it didn't help me much. So how could I make? So that's the point where you could tap into it and control your own assertion to maybe just compare the two arrays and report back. Say, hey, this test failed because we got this extra topping here. We got pineapple, right? So you run your test report, you look at the failing message, and it tells me, oh, your meat lover now has pineapple in it. Oh, I see where that's coming from, right? By the way, as you guys have questions, you can either hold them or start typing them. There will be 2 spots in the presentation where I'm going to specifically stop to just take the questions. But between now and then, I'll just roll through the content that I have as I have it. So can we make this any better, right? It's already a little bit better than we had before, but can we make it better? Here's some of the things that I do. You see the ugly comments, how I show comments on my IDE, right? With the red background, with the yellow foreground. That's something I specifically do. I've been doing for over 10 years, or I don't remember for how long. My point being that if somebody took the time to put comment in the code, I might as well read it. It's important, right? Somebody commented on it. And when those comments don't really add anything to the comprehension of what I'm reading, I get them out of there. So I have a whole blog post. You can see the link there on my to my blog. If you check out on my blog, lasala.net, search for about commenting code. I have a whole blog post with a podcast that I've given as an interview just to talk about my take on, what kind of comments do I use and when I not use them. So the arrange act assert. When I see that, it's like, yeah, how can I get rid of it? That's one aspect of it, but we're gonna be talking about that. When I see arrange act assert, I started flipping it around, and again, I have a blog post for that as well that you can see at the top of the slide there, where I talk about going from arrange act assert to given when then, which a lot of people will know as the gherkin language, right? Why is it important for me to see it as given when then? That's a way that steps away from the technical side of things, and it makes me think more in business terms, more in English terms, because assert, like arrange act assert here, is very technical, right? You're arranging your objects. Given, it's more about the context. It makes me step out of the technical realm of things. So that's where I normally go. So I replace those with given when thens, but I keep moving that forward. So those 2 givens that we have in those 2 tests this far, they are doing the same thing. They are instantiating the pizza maker class, right? So that's redundant. We try to remove redundancy from implementation code, and many times we drop the ball with our tests. Well, our tests are just code as well, so let's refactor it. So one step that I take is to extract that into a method, which I name it given a whatever it is that I'm giving there, in this case, a pizza maker, right? So I extract that into a method. Notice that the pizza or the pizza maker, I put that in a field in that class, right? And I just have it populate that field, as opposed to returning the pizza maker from that method, because then it would read weird, like var pizza maker equals given a pizza maker. I don't want to have those things in there. And I'll come back to that point in a little bit. Right, so once I've extracted that, I can now, as I make these very minimal changes, I run the tests. Because it doesn't matter how small the change is, it may break something. So I make the little refactoring, I run the tests, I see they all green, good. Now can I use the same given a pizza maker method in the other tests, right? So I go through, and of course I go now to my Hawaiian pizza, right? And then when I start typing given, well, now I can leverage IntelliSense code completion to see all of my givens. That's a plus. It makes writing new tests easier and faster because I already have certain setups there. The other point about the thing here, sorry, something just escaped my mind here. No, we're good. So I reuse that same method, and then why is it important to extract it in one and then go replacing in the others? Sometimes, even though the setup looks very similar, I've been in situations where I extract and then I try to reuse the same givens, and then different tests fail. As it turns out, as I look closer to the setup on the tests that looked very similar, there is something like a small thing that's different. Maybe it's a true false thing that's different, or maybe it's a 1 or 2 that's passed in as a parameter that I was overlooking before. So by doing this, I can actually start seeing, oh, this is how these 2 or 3 or however many tests are different. So it makes me think more about the context for each test. When I present this to some folks, they say, well, but now the tests are sharing a field. Isn't that bad? Because like for concurrency issues, because if we run those tests in parallel, now we may get some intermittent, failed tests because they are all using the same objects. Not really. Yes, if you do have your test runner set to run tests in the same file concurrently, you could have that problem. I normally force the test runner to not run tests in the same file concurrently. If they're in separate files, it doesn't matter because they're going to be different instances anyways, no big deal. Well, but what if you have a test file with 100 tests, right? Well, I shouldn't have a test file with so many tests, right? I'm not going to get into context-based tests for this talk, but the idea is if I have a test file with that many tests, I'll look into start pulling them into separate files. So ideally, every test file that I have will have no more than, say, 3 to 6 tests. So, and since they're unit tests, they run really quick. I don't care about running them in parallel within a single file. Okay, so that has never been an issue for me. Did my given, next step, extract the when part, right? Given, when. So use your tool, refactoring tool of choice, select the block, refactor it in a when. So in this case, right, what is the when? Well, the when is, we're calling the make meat lover pizza. So my when is when making meat lover pizza, right? And here, also using the casing to improve readability. So instead of having like all lowercase when making meat lover pizza, play with the casing. Like in this case, meat lover, I've made it all uppercase. Because if I have like half a dozen tests there for the different pizzas that I make, you know, by scanning through the code, those things that are uppercase, they will jump at me. So the mind will be able to identify those things way quicker, right? Moving on, those given when then methods that I create, I dump them all at the bottom of the file. Because when I open a test, I want to see the given when then right at the top. That's the most important thing that I want to see when I get into tests. From there, I can just F12, right, go to definition, and then the methods are right there at the bottom of the file, right? Is this good enough? Right now the test looks a lot cleaner, but to me it's still not good enough. We can do it a little bit better. I look at code like this and I say, how would I like this code to read, right? To make it more flowing, if you will. And then I write something like this, like, then only the following toppings are expected in the list of toppings, right? It's still very similar to the one we had before, but now it reads so much better, right? Given a pizza maker, when, oh, I'm sorry, there's I messed up the sentence there. When making meat lover pizza, oh, I get it. When meat lover pizza is made, then only the following toppings are expected. Reads like English. It has some weird characters, you know, the curly braces and the parentheses and stuff like that. But still, I only see English when I arrive at the test. Much easier, right? Now, the business is growing and, you know, somebody says, oh, now our pizza place is going to be making Brazilian pizza. And since I'm the owner, I'll tell you that my Brazilian pizza has a lot of meat and a lot of cheese, right? Maybe it doesn't work for all Brazilians, but that's this Brazilian here, right? So what do? I go to that test, I create a new fact, a new spec. I say, okay, this is my Brazilian pizza. I write out when Brazilian pizza is made, then only the following toppings. Got that, now I need to implement that. How are Brazilian pizzas made, right? I create my when Brazilian pizza is made method. I put, and then that's where I drop into TDD, right? Because the thing at the top, a lot of people get very confused about BDD and TDD. It's like, oh, yeah, I do BDD, but I don't do TDD, or vice versa, because they don't quite see the lines between them. I didn't used to see it myself. So what we have on the screen right now, that's behavior-driven development. We are developing a feature based on its behavior, right? Not about what are the classes that we're going to be creating for this? What are the methods or functions? What are the parameters? We're not thinking in those terms. We're thinking in English terms about the behavior. Once we've identified the behavior, then we go into test-driven development or test-driven design, right? So when Brazilian pizza is made, okay, let me think about it. We don't have a way to make Brazilian pizzas. It gets me thinking, okay, we have a pizza maker. I can add a method to it to follow the same standard that we are doing for the other ones. But then Brazilians are picky. Maybe they want to pass in a special request, like this guy who wants a ton of meat on his pizza. Whatever the case might be, this is my TDD mind at work. Because somebody could say, oh no, for Brazilian pizza, we cannot use the pizza maker object as it is. There's actually an API that we have to call. And so maybe we need to create, you know, a proxy into that API or some sort of, you know, however you're going to be implementing that. It's my time to think about that, right? But instead of starting with that, I start with the behavior. Then I figure out how I want to implement that as far as code goes, right? Now we're talking with people. The point behind that is the following. We started with tests that look with a range, you know, like arrange, act, assert, bunch of assertions, a lot of copy and paste. As a developer, I do not feel like showing that kind of test to anybody who's not a developer, right? I would not show those tests to my product owners, to my business analysts, to the business people, because it's like they're gonna look at this like, yeah, I don't follow. I see the names like of the toppings, but all these other stuff here, I don't understand. What is with that equal greater than sign? What does that mean, right? Now, if we have the tests looking like this, on the other hand, same tests, it's exactly the same tests, but they read like English like this, well, I feel no shame in actually showing that to my non-technical friends, right? Because now they can help me read through this and they might say, oh, no, on my business, meat lover pizzas should have all those plus something else or what have you, right? So you bring them into our software developer world, and we have this collaboration. This is a big thing, right? So, and the other thing, look, Mom, no libraries, no special things, no nothing, right? I'm still in C# land. I haven't brought any kind of special BDD framework or BDD classes or no. This is still just plain old C#, right? Back in the day when I first started looking into things like this, I've experimented with a bunch of frameworks and things. And the main holdup was that developers had to also learn those libraries. So they were not writing tests because there was more stuff for them to learn. Here, dude, this is just extracting method, right? Creating a new method and naming it in a way that makes sense in English. That's it. If I can get developers to just think that way, we're good, right? The business will thank you. I can tell you from experience that over the last several years, I've been thanked by business folks because when I show them things like this, they're like, oh, I can see you're a developer who's thinking about my business. I thank you for that. Because many developers say, oh yeah, I have a hard time justifying writing tests to the business. They say that they cannot pay us to write tests like that. I ask them, well, when you tell them why you're writing tests, what do you say? Normally they say, oh, to make sure that my code works. To make sure that your code works, and that's a weak excuse. If you flip that around and you say, I'm writing tests to describe the business as I understand, as I get from the user stories, as I get from the acceptance criteria. That's why I'm writing the test, to make sure that when I implement code, the code is actually backing up the business need there. You show that to the business, they're not going to ask you, why are you writing tests? They're going to go like, oh, you actually care about my business. I see that you're actually listening to what we've been talking about in sprint planning, in product backlog refinement and things like that. Right? I haven't had to justify why I write tests in so long because that's just like, nope, the dude is delivering what we are asking him to with quality. You know, we can actually collaborate and, you know, I can look over his code thing. There are some weird curly braces and stuff, but I can read the other stuff. It's like, so all that magic that developers do, that's still there, but it's pushed away where, you know, to where it makes sense to have that magic, like where developers are working with implementation code, go to town. Collaborating with other people, your testers, your business analysts, and so on, there you go. You have a way to do that. This is a good time for us to gather some questions. So if you do have questions, go ahead, type them in the Q&A feature there. As you are typing, or while you're typing, I'd like to bring also the attention to, if you go to the Improving YouTube channel, you look for Trusting It like this, maybe put my name there. You're going to find another presentation that I gave on how or what practices you can follow to build trust between your software development team and your business. So the practices that I'm discussing right now, like writing clean tests in this manner, it's one of the practices that I mentioned in that you know, bigger context, I would say, for this. So make sure to check that out. It may help you like drive the conversation about this practice with your team, with your business. Michael, what we got?
All right, Claudio, I do have one comment here so far.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like someone has seen an error in one of your tests, which is that pineapple provides an excellent sweet flavor on salty meat pizza lovers' pizzas, which is an excellent feature enhancement. So your cert statement will likely fail.
But that, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I follow. So if the implementation
they are making a colorful joke that pineapple belongs on all pizzas.
Oh, thank you very much. I love pineapples, right? I definitely do love pineapples, and I love Hawaiian pizza. But so I just made it also as a joke myself. It's like, no, my meat lover pizza, I want to see meat, dude.
That's all we have for now, so we can keep going.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. So where's the love for JavaScript, for TypeScript? Because all that C# stuff is great, but I live in JavaScript, TypeScript, or other languages. It doesn't matter. I still follow the same practices across all of these languages. So for example, I was recently working on I am currently working on an Angular project, right? And then I started noticing some of the tests showing up with that same pattern that I showed in that original C# test, where you have assertions, like a bunch of assertions, where only a little bit of those assertions change. It's like the field or the property that you are verifying on the test. I say, okay, all right, this is TypeScript, this is Angular, it really doesn't matter. How can I clean that up? So I wrote the code I would like to see in the test, even though I didn't have the code. It's like, I don't know if the library support this kind of notation, but let me write what I would like to see. And then I came up with something like this, right? Expect result to have properties, bang, because that's what the test was doing. Given a certain object, make sure that it has the following properties, or in some case there, it does not have the following properties, because for that test specifically, it was important that the object didn't have those properties. Okay, right. So this is how I would like to read it. Expect results to have properties X, Y, and Z. This one here, like as we see through the code, it's like, okay, it's going result, 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 and then I see something different. What's different here? Oh, okay, here instead of result, it's result sales order header, and then it continues checking result. You know, when you see the code like this, there's a lot of code, and you have to like twist your mind, your head like that to be able to see what's different, what's going on. Well, here it makes it simple to see that. Expect result to have properties X, Y, and Z. Expect result to lack properties. One could say, couldn't you say expect to not have properties? Yes, you could. I just didn't find a way to implement that with my current knowledge, right? There's got to be a way, but it was the best I could come up with when I was working on this little bit here, right? So better reporting. So once you've created that more specific assertion for your business, for your domain language, then you can start reporting on those things. So like in this case here, we are saying, hey, the object is missing the expected properties. And then it tells you, hey, we've received the following properties. And the properties missing are, oh, okay, seller ID. Yeah, I see seller ID XXX. What did you receive? Oh, I see, it's seller ID, not XXX. Right, so right on the assertion message, the failing message, we see what's wrong. Because when we write the code, we know what can go wrong. It's like, we do expect these properties to be on the thing. If it's not there, it can't function. So just relay that back so that as that comes up as a defect, it tells you, hey, dude, this is what's wrong with the code, right? It just saves in the time in the long run. Remember extending the assertion library or learning about your assertion library. All of the assertion libraries out there, they support some sort of creation of custom matchers or custom assertions. So in this case, that test that we were looking at, it's using Jest as the test framework. And Jest supports extending its assertion library by creating custom matchers, right? So the way to do that, you go and you create, expect, extend, and then here's the name of the thing that you want to support. So in this case, to have properties, the object that you receive, your expectation is going to be described in this case as an array of strings. And then you say, hey, it's a Jest custom method result that I'm writing here. And here's just plain vanilla. You have two objects, you compare them, you populate an array with what the problems are, and then how do you know whether the assertion has passed or not? In this case, hey, do we have any missing properties, right? Because if we do, it failed, and then you build the message however makes sense for you as a business. So instead of saying, like in this case, it's okay to say the following properties are missing. On the pizza case, we could say the following toppings are missing on this pizza, because the folks who wrote Jest or whatever test framework you're using, they have no idea about your business. The developers do. So create the assertions based on the domain language, based on the business, what makes sense to the business. That's way more important than just saying, oh, I expected a true and I got a false. Okay, but what does true mean in this context? Oh, I expect the object to not be null. Okay, what does that mean? When you get, an actual object, what does that mean? Oh, we do have a sales order, or we do have a purchase order. Whatever that means, put that business meaning behind it and have your assertions resemble that. Whoops, get out of that mode. Here we go. Again, this is a test for Angular. In this case, it's an Angular component, right? So you're not even thinking about like the business feature that sits close to the user, the end user. This is an Angular component. It's a technical thing. We still write the tests in the shape of given when then. So I don't care if it's a very businessy thing that we're describing or whether it's a very deep technical component or algorithm. It doesn't matter. I still think it in terms of given when then. Given a certain context, when the following thing happens, then this is what I'm expecting out of the system, right? Now with that, since this is a component, something technical, like it's okay for us to talk about like something being at the root level. What is root level? Well, here it makes sense in the aspect of like a DOM elements and how you're rendering that on the page. But notice that we also have business things here, like where it talks about sales order. It talks about draft. A draft here, a sales order that just started getting like written, that's a draft. So it's a business thing. So again, if I show this or I collaborate with non-technical people, they're looking over, it's like, well, I don't know about the root level thing, but yeah, sales order, yeah, draft. We can have an intelligent conversation around that, right? Keeping on going here, this is a Cypress IO end-to-end test, right? So slightly different kind of test. And then this is some code I wrote a little while ago where we had a page that got rendered, and that page had an element that shows the balance report target quantity. So my task was to retrieve or find that element on the page, and then I wanted to make sure that that element included this text here, fulfill to 50. Now, in order to do this very simple thing, there is like a lot of syntax. This to me, it's too much syntax for something so simple. The $, div, the arrow going in there, all the parentheses. There's just too much syntax for something so simple, right? And then again, copy paste for all the different things that I want to check. That bugs me, right? So I wrote, how do I want to read this? And then I came up with something like this. CY, which is Cypress, gets the following element, and that element should have included text, fulfill, whatever, right? Yeah, one might say, oh, but this, have dot included text. It's just a way to work with the assertion library at this point. But at least I can like read through it without seeing, $signs and, way more parentheses and dots than I actually need. Once I have that, well, and this is the other problem. As I started learning Cypress and, oh, this is how you write that kind of stuff, I had to keep going back and say, oh, how do we write that again? Oh, yes, it receives the div, it goes into a block, and then I use the expect. It was too much for me to remember, right? Once I've wrapped that up, right, again, remember assertion libraries, how to extend them. So learn about them. Learn about how can you write your own assertions. So like in the case of Cypress, I've learned that you can, it uses the chai assertions. So then you can add a method. What's the name of your method? It's what makes sense to you, to your business. What do you receive? And then you have, some things that you can use like the assert itself, right? It's just a plain old assert, but you compose how you want to broadcast, if that thing failed. Good deal. So more Cypress IO tests. This is another case where in this feature, the user would go in, they were adding categories and they could be nested. So add a category, a top level category, click to add a subcategory. So what I wanted to test was, okay, the user clicks to add a category, types in the code and the name for the category, hits, confirms, then the behavior should be, now I want to see the new category on the list. And there's an API call that should have been made to the backend to persist that change, right? So I figured, okay, this is how we write that in Cypress, or how I've learned how to write it. I want to get that category with this little regular expression. I want to extract the ID of that category out of the div that I found, and that's the syntax required for that. Then I want to get the specific row that represents that category. And then I want to make sure that, hey, the name is the name that the guy typed right up somewhere else in the code. And the code should be this. So here I'm already using that extension that I just showed you in the previous slide. And then once I verified, yep, the feature actually shows the new category on the screen. And, there is an API call with the following payload, right? So there's a lot of like syntax in the middle. And then again, how would I like to write that? Because I don't want to write that same kind of code every time. So I ended up coming up with something like this. Visit category 1, so the first one on the list, because category 0 is really just the header for the list. Verify category is meat and delicious meat. Keep top level category, because this once I've created the top level one, I have to know what ID got created, because then I want to verify the subcategory that I've added. So it's important for me to keep that. And then verify that the API, the add API called, with the following payload actually happened, right? Still the same code, but it reads so much better. And I can reuse those functions in this case to actually do this, write the same kind of test in a much easier way. As I write new tests, it's going to take way less code than it did as I was figuring this stuff out, right? Now notice that all of those functions, they are my given when thens, right? But even in the implementation of my given when thens, I look for ways to make it read better, so that later when we need to learn what's going on here, it just makes it easier for us to maintain those tests at a later point. So again, this is just Cypress IO test. Look how it reads. Given, when, then, when this other thing happened, then. Because the main difference is with unit tests, it's usually given, when, then. It's a unit. In an end-to-end test, I use end-to-end not as in front end to back end and then back. I use it more as end-to-end, the workflow that the user is trying to follow for that one distinct operation, right? Which is given this thing, when the user does this, then we show this. Then when the user does this other thing, then this. When the user does this other thing, right? So it's like a full workflow, a meaningful workflow for one business activity, right? But still, look, it looks like the test that I showed for Angular and for backend stuff with C#, right? So same language, English, better communication. What you see on the screen here, on the left, you have unit and integration tests written for the backend. See what it looks like, given when then. In the middle, unit and integration tests for the front end, our Angular components and functions and services, given when then. On the right side, end-to-end tests, workflow tests for the application, given when then, right? So as a developer, even though I sit mostly on the back end, that's where I focus most of the time, when I go to the front end, I can still work with the code base, right? Because it's represented like that. So as we build features, we can easily jump from front end to back end, middle tier, or however you have it structured, and the tests all look very similar. Yes, the syntax may look slightly different because C# is object oriented, and JavaScript is not, right? And TypeScript, it's kind of a hybrid between the two, what have you. But the words that we see there, they are English. And again, business folks will really appreciate that, right? It dispels all that magic, and it's hard to trust people that are performing magic and you have no idea how that works. It's hard to build trust when that's the kind of situation. In a situation like this, yeah, you're building trust with your stakeholders. When I present these things, as we're getting ready to wrap things up here, folks always ask, what about Cucumber and SpecFlow? Those are tools that will allow you to write the gherkin, the given when thens, as plain text. It's great when you have non-technical people writing that for you. That's great. If you only have developers, though, writing those things, I've learned from my experience that it's actually harder. Because as a developer, now I have to maintain the text representation and the code that actually empowers that notation. Because that text, there's something behind it that runs like some regular expressions to match. Oh, given Alice is hungry, there's some code that we read that and then run some actual programming language for that. So you have to maintain both. So if it's the same person, a developer, there's no benefit in doing something like that. So being there, done that, this is the experience that I've gathered. If you only have developers writing the tests, I don't see a lot of value here. If you do have, like, it has happened to me where as a developer, I write those in that manner. I get interest from people who are non-technical. They see that it's like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. I can actually help you write those test cases like that. Great. Once we get them in the flow, then yeah, it may be time to bring such tool in because now they can take charge of writing those. And then as a developer, I just need to implement the features, right? Important thing here is that I've talked to a lot of developers who at times ask, well, but I don't do BDD because then I have to set up Cucumber and or SpecFlow and there's DevOps and there are servers and there blah, blah, blah. No, dude, just grab a napkin and if you can write the thing that you're going to be building on your napkin as given when thens, that is a huge progress because you may have the most amazing setup in your servers, in your architecture, and the tools that you use. If people cannot write good, clear expectations in English, there are no tools that will save your project, right? And that comes from somebody who does not speak English primarily, right? So it forces me to write better English, to think in English better, to communicate with the business, to make sure that I actually understand what is it that we're building. Once I get that understanding, then tools, processes, they will become important. But first, we need to bridge that gap with the communication and collaboration. Okay, so then again, if you already have a practice where people are already writing acceptance criteria in that format, by all means, use the tools available like that. Otherwise, you may need to like ramp up. And again, in my way to ramp up, I don't need external tools. I don't need fancy schmancy tools or libraries or programming languages. I just need to communicate with people like that, right? So this is a good time to post questions or comments or concerns you guys might have, as you have about 3 minutes to just wrap things up. So please go ahead, type those. As I wrap things up here, what did we learn? Refactor tests make refactoring implementation code easier. Because when we talk about refactoring, we say refactoring is the process of changing the implementation, right? The internal implementation without changing the external behavior. If your tests are written based on implementation, you're not testing the behavior. So you're violating that, right? You need your tests documenting the behavior. And then you're free to refactor your implementation, right? They go hand in hand. So that's extremely important. So remember, spend quite a bit of time in the red zone of Red-Green-Refactor. Write down, figure out what is it that you're trying to solve, what challenge you're trying to address. Get to the green, to make the test pass, and then spend time seeing, okay, the thing that I have now, do I have good description of what we've just built, right? The behaviors that we're looking for, and then iterate over that, refactoring not just implementation code, but also the test that you have. So, Michael, what did we have as questions there?
Hey, Claudio, you must have done an excellent job because I have no questions right now in the queue.
All right. Well, so I guess I was either very clear on it or it was my accent showing up and nobody has a clue as to what I was talking. No big deal. Some closing thoughts here. I run every week a virtual brown bag meeting. You can go to virtualbrownbag.com to find out about what it is. It's over lunch break. We just get together, no set agenda. We just talk about stuff related to software development and our profession. Make sure to check out the free virtual events that we have, such as this one on our website. You can see what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Also, Improving has a bunch of virtual classes. Our virtual classes are becoming very popular because they work really well. Our trainers have found out, a great way to make it work in this virtual realm that we're operating. So, things around Scrum and Agile, product owners, Scrum masters, check it out. We have a lot of good stuff coming up there. Again, my email is up there on the screen. If you think of any questions or if you start trying to apply some of these things that I've described to you, and then you run into roadblocks, because right now it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense. I'll try it. I'll make it work. And then as you do it yourself, it's like, but Claudio, that doesn't quite work. Well, shoot me an email and let's talk about it, right? And other than that, have a pleasant rest of the day and a great weekend. And I hope to see you all next time.
All right. Thank you all for attending Improving's virtual Lunch and Learn with Claudio Lasala. The recording of this session will be available in a few days on our virtual events page at improving.com/virtual-events. We at Improving hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.